water, darkness, and stone. In the hidden world beneath our feet, 3 teams of explorers ventured where few humans dare to go. 3 cave expeditions began with hope, but ended in disaster. These true stories reveal what happens when brave adventurers face the unforgiving power of nature's most isolated spaces. Riesending Cave Tragedy. Trapped in darkness, 3,000 feet below the Earth's surface, one man fighting for survival. June 8, 2014, the day Riesending Cave revealed its deadly power. Cave explorer Johann Westhauser, 52, and his 2 teammates entered Germany's deepest cave that morning at 10:34 a.m. This limestone labyrinth in Bavaria, just 13.7 miles from the Austrian border, is classified as a vertical supercave, dropping 3,766 feet. Westhauser, a physicist at the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, was no amateur. As one of the original discoverers of Riesending in 1995, he had participated in 72 previous expeditions into its depths. In the world of extreme caving, experience isn't always enough to keep you alive. The cave's statistics tell the story of its dangers: 720 known shafts, 19 boulder chokes, water temperatures averaging 3 degrees Celsius, and oxygen levels dropping to 18% in its deepest sections. Their expedition goal was ambitious: to explore beyond Base Station 6 at 3,450 feet depth, reaching unexplored territory where they hoped to find the theoretical connection to Austria's Kolowrat cave system. With each foot deeper, the cave's grip tightened around the 3 men. The team's LED headlamps pierced the darkness as they rappelled down the second vertical shaft, a 98-foot drop. The air temperature was a steady 7 degrees Celsius, with the humidity at 92%, conditions that made the rock surface slick with condensation. At 11:42 a.m., they reached Base Station 2, positioned 780 feet below the entrance. Disaster nearly struck when Johann noted signs of acute stress reaction in his teammate, Thomas B., 47. The symptoms were alarming: pupil dilation, non-responsive behavior, and cognitive dissociation, a dangerous condition when 780 feet underground. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy in a cave isn't the darkness or the cold, it's your own mind turning against you. Turning back would mean a 4-hour ascent through 2 technical vertical pitches. Continuing required navigating 14 more rope sections through increasingly unstable rock. Based on their remaining 11 hours of primary light sources and 6.2 liters of water, they chose to proceed deeper, passing the point of no easy return, marked on the 2010 survey map. The cave seemed to be awakening, shifting and groaning as tiny rocks began to fall, warning signs the team chose to ignore. The explorers began their 3rd descent at 12:23 p.m., dropping toward a depth of 1,500 feet. Johann Westhauser immediately had trouble with his rope catching and scraping against the rough limestone walls. Cave measurements here showed the shaft getting narrower, squeezing down from 5.4 meters to only 3.7 meters wide. At 1,250 feet below the entrance, carbon dioxide readings reached 0.8%, 8,000 parts per million. Still safe, but causing subtle cognitive impairment. The team had now been underground for over 6 hours, and their body temperatures were starting to drop in the cold cave. The sound of falling rocks, some weighing up to 15 kilograms, echoed through the shaft with 3.7 seconds of delay, indicating the extreme depth. Each falling rock emphasized the statistical reality of the 14 serious caving accidents in Riesending. Since 2002, 9 had occurred in this exact section. They were now traversing what local cavers called the crumbling zone, and the most dangerous part of their journey still lay ahead. In the silent darkness, 3 men faced a choice that would echo through their lives forever. At 1:15 p.m., as more rocks were falling, the team stopped for an emergency meeting at 1,320 feet below the surface. Their headlamps made a small circle of light while they talked about the worsening conditions. Later studies showed that about 70 kilograms of rock had already broken off the walls in this area, a serious danger sign. They faced a tough choice. Climbing back up would mean going up 1,320 vertical feet, which would burn about 4,300 calories per person. But they only had about 2,800 calories of food left each. The team was already getting cold, with body temperatures dropping to 36.2 degrees Celsius, which is the beginning of mild hypothermia. What feels like the right choice in the depths can become your worst nightmare. "We've passed the safety threshold," the most experienced teammate stated, calculating they had consumed 68% of their energy reserves, but completed only 41% of their planned route. Johann's heart rate jumped to 134 beats per minute, a sign of extreme stress in his body. His blood pressure was high at 157/92. He was experiencing cave brain, a condition where being deep in caves makes it hard to think clearly and judge risks properly. The team decided at 1:29 p.m. to keep going down instead of turning back. Going down the cave's steep 55-degree slope would use much less energy than climbing back up the same way. They chose to descend further into the underworld, unaware that fate was already setting its trap. What they didn't know was that weather monitors had just recorded a small earthquake, 1.2 on the Richter scale, near Untersberg Mountain. These tiny shakes would make the already dangerous cave even more unstable in the coming hours. Each successful step deeper was both victory and trap, bringing them closer to discovery, but further from safety. At 2:48 p.m., after going down 3 more dangerous rope sections, the team reached Base Station 3, which was 1,840 feet below the surface. Next, they faced the scary chimney drop, a 73-meter straight-down shaft where they needed perfect rope skills at 3 different anchor points. If they could make it through this part, they would reach Base Station 4 and the safer Millennium Passage, a rare flat section in a cave that was mostly steep drops. In the crushing silence of the deep, even breathing becomes a conscious act, a reminder that life exists where it was never meant to. By 4:15 p.m., all 3 men reached Base Station 4, about 2,310 feet underground. They were only 38 minutes behind schedule despite their problems. They had each drunk only 1.2 liters of their 3-liter water supply, which was worrying. The 240-meter flat Millennium Passage gave them their first real chance to rest. Being able to walk instead of rope climbing saved their energy. They took 72 minutes to cross this section, moving carefully on the slippery, muddy floor and always keeping 3 points of contact for safety. 10 hours without sunlight changes a person. The mind begins to play tricks that the body can't afford. After more than 10 hours underground, the team was showing signs of serious stress. Their blood sugar levels dropped to 68 milligrams per deciliter, which was getting dangerously low. At 7:42 p.m., after squeezing through tight passages sometimes only 50 centimeters wide, the team reached Base Station 5, which was 3,150 feet deep. This spot was marked by a small metal plate from a 2012 German-Austrian expedition. Even though they were tired, they felt excited. Their blood oxygen levels were at 91%, a bit low, but still safe to continue. This place was special. Only 27 people had ever reached this deep into Riesending cave. They were excited because just past the next station, Base Station 6, was unexplored territory. They hoped to find a connection to Austria's huge Colorado cave system, which would be one of the biggest cave discoveries in European history. The cave keeps its greatest treasures behind its deadliest traps. Their excitement quickly faced a harsh reality check. Their safety equipment showed worrying signs. The carbon dioxide level was at 1.1%, 11,000 parts per million, getting close to the danger limit of 1.5%. Their scanner found 5 big cracks in the ceiling that had moved 3 to 7 millimeters since last year, showing the cave was actively shifting. Most worrying was where they were on the emergency map. They had entered the critical recovery zone, a place where rescue would take more than 100 hours if someone got hurt. Cave rescue records showed only 3 people had ever been successfully rescued from similar depths, with only 38% of seriously injured cavers surviving. At this depth, the cave doesn't just challenge you, it claims you. Johann carefully checked their situation. They were 11.2 hours away from the emergency supplies at Base Station 2 and about 15 hours from the surface. And that's if everything went perfectly. Their emergency beacon still worked, but they had lost voice contact with the surface at Base Station 4. They could only send short text messages through the rock. At 8:17 p.m., the team faced the dangerous boulder crawl, a 30-meter section leading to Base Station 6, filled with loose, unstable rocks. Previous studies had found this area contained weak limestone that could break apart easily. Their equipment showed the ceiling was 0.8 degrees Celsius colder than the surrounding rock, a sign that water was seeping in and making it weaker. Johann offered to go first. He figured that with his 79-kilogram weight spread across his hands and feet, he would put less pressure on the rocks than what should cause a collapse. Moving very carefully, he made it through the first 14 meters safely, talking with his teammates through their short-range radios the whole time. One moment can change everything when you're 3,200 feet from the sun. At 8:24 p.m., a heavy rock about 12 kilograms broke free from the ceiling without any warning sound. It hit Johann directly on top of his helmet with enough force to break through it, even though the helmet was designed to withstand strong impacts. The helmet cracked right down the middle. Johann fell to the cave floor about 1.2 meters below. His headlamp broke when he hit the ground, leaving that part of the cave in total darkness. His teammates called out to him desperately, but he didn't answer. All they could hear was more small rocks falling. The blow caused serious head trauma and knocked Johann completely unconscious. Medical experts later estimated his condition as a 7 on the Glasgow coma scale, which meant a severe brain injury. He lay helpless on the ground as more debris fell around him. The rock had broken through his helmet, cutting his scalp about 4 centimeters and badly bruising his skull. 3,000 feet from daylight, the thin line between adventure and disaster had been crossed. At the incredible depth of 3,280 feet, as deep as 3 Empire State Buildings stacked underground, Johann lay still while his teammates hurried to help him. Thomas R., 43, who had medical training, quickly checked Johann's condition. His vital signs were weak. His heart beat only 52 times per minute. He was breathing slowly, just 9 breaths per minute. And his pupils were different sizes and responded slowly to light. All signs of a serious brain injury. The team quickly followed their emergency plan. Thomas made a neck brace from their first aid kit to keep Johann's spine from moving. He gave Johann a special medicine shot to stop brain swelling. Johann had a 4.7 centimeter cut on his head that was bleeding, so Thomas pressed clean gauze on it to stop the blood. In the crushing depths, hope seemed as fragile as the broken helmet lying beside them. The seriousness of their situation was crushing. According to their emergency plans, they were in Zone 5 of the cave map, a place where professional rescue would take more than 100 hours. Cave rescue records showed only 2 people had ever been successfully rescued from similar depths in the last 10 years, and both had less serious injuries than Johann. Thomas and Klaus G., 38, the third team member, looked at each other without speaking. They both realized the same terrible fact. Johann's chances of survival dropped by about 7% every hour until he could get proper medical care. They only had 8 hours worth of pain medicine and 14 hours of emergency oxygen in their supplies, making the hardest choice when every option seems impossible. "We follow Emergency Protocol C," Thomas finally said, referring to their emergency plan. The hard decision was clear. Klaus would climb back to the surface alone, a difficult 13 to 16-hour journey up 3,280 vertical feet, while Thomas would stay with Johann to care for him. At 8:41 p.m., Klaus began climbing alone after getting essential supplies and setting up a schedule to use their beacon system. He took only the most important gear, making his pack 40% lighter for faster climbing. With good luck, he would reach the cave entrance between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. the next morning. Thomas stayed with Johann in the darkness, using heat packs to keep him warm in the cold, 3.8 degrees Celsius cave. Every 15 minutes, Thomas checked Johann's brain function and recorded the results in a waterproof notebook with trembling hands. Their small yellow emergency tent caught the light from Thomas's headlamp, making a small safe spot in one of Earth's most dangerous places. 10 hours of climbing through Earth's veins with one desperate mission: to bring help before it's too late. At 6:47 a.m. on June 9th, 2014, Klaus G. finally reached the cave entrance and stepped into the morning sunlight. His body was pushed to the limit. He had a fever of 38.9 degrees Celsius. His heart was racing at 142 beats per minute, and his blood sugar had dropped dangerously low to 58 milligrams per deciliter. Even though he had been climbing non-stop for over 10 hours up 3,280 feet of difficult cave passages, he immediately grabbed the emergency satellite phone from its waterproof case near the cave entrance. He made the emergency call at 6:53 a.m. Within just 7 minutes, the Bavarian Mountain Rescue Service activated their emergency cave rescue plan, sending alerts to special cave rescue teams in 5 different countries. The emergency was classified as Category 5, life-threatening situation, extreme depth, technical extraction required, the most serious level. When the most dangerous place meets the most dangerous situation, even the world's best rescuers pause. By 8:15 a.m., rescue leader Michael Renner gathered his team in Berchtesgaden to study 3D models of Riesending Cave and plan the rescue. The situation was grim. No one had ever been rescued from depths over 3,000 feet in any European cave. Rescue expert Norbert Rosenberger told Der Spiegel, "Rescuing someone from Riesending is much harder than from Mount Everest. On Everest, helicopters can reach 8,000 meters. Here, we must carry everything through miles of vertical passages by hand." On June 10th, at 5:30 a.m., 45 hours after the accident, the rescue began. 3 teams of 11 expert rescuers from Germany, Austria, and Switzerland entered the cave. 1 for medical care, 1 for rope setup, and 1 for communications. They carried 178 kilograms of equipment, including a special 12-kilogram carbon fiber Tyramont stretcher, designed for narrow caves with 26 rope attachment points and shock absorbers. By 11:20 a.m., the communications team set up the Cave Link system, using low-frequency waves that could travel through rock. This allowed short 32-character messages to pass through 1,500 feet of rock every 15 minutes, keeping surface teams connected with rescuers underground. The cave presented extreme challenges. Some passages were only 38 centimeters wide, forcing rescuers to remove equipment to squeeze through. The cave varied from huge chambers to tiny mouse holes, requiring constant changes between climbing, crawling, and rope techniques. At Base Station 2, they set up the first supply point with medical supplies, hot food, and extra batteries. After 72 critical hours, on June 11th at 7:42 p.m., Dr. Alexander Kemmermeyer reached Johann after a 16-hour journey, carrying 22 kilograms of medical equipment. He diagnosed Johann with a grade 2 brain injury, facial fractures, and low body temperature, 35.2 degrees Celsius. Despite this, Johann had regained consciousness and scored 13 on the Glasgow Coma Scale, much better than his estimated score of 7 after the accident. A second doctor arrived at 11:20 p.m. with more supplies and gave Johann the 4th fluids and pain medicine. The decision came with enormous risk, but offered the only path to survival. After careful examination, both doctors decided Johann was stable enough to be moved. They sent a short message to the surface through the Cave Link system. PT stable, extraction possible, proceeding. Getting Johann out required incredible preparation. Technical teams worked ahead of the medical team, installing 64 new bolts in cave walls, 1,200 meters of safety ropes, 24 special rigging points for transferring the stretcher, and 16 emergency supply caches along the route. This rescue became the largest in European cave rescue history. At the busiest times, 60 rescuers worked at the same time inside Riesending Cave, 42 directly helping with moving Johann, and 18 maintaining communication and supply lines. Above ground, 728 people from 5 countries worked in 12-hour shifts to coordinate the entire operation. In Earth's dark depths, machines fail, but human determination finds a way. The biggest challenge in Johann's rescue was clear. They couldn't use any machines to help. The cave passages were too narrow for any motorized equipment, and some vertical shafts were over 100 meters deep, so rescuers had to rely completely on human strength and clever techniques. Teams worked in 4-hour shifts to avoid getting too tired in the cold 4 degrees Celsius cave environment. In the vertical sections, rescuers used the Hungarian counterweight system, where groups of 6 to 8 people used their combined body weight as a counterbalance to the stretcher. This required perfect teamwork, with rescuers hanging on parallel ropes, slowly rising as Johann's stretcher was lowered down. The rescue moved extremely slowly, only about 25 to 30 meters per hour in flat passages and just 8 to 12 meters per hour in vertical shafts. Every day, medical teams checked Johann's brain function and gave him IV fluids and medicine to keep him stable during the long, difficult journey. After 11 days in darkness, light finally returned. On June 19th at 11:44 a.m., exactly 11 days, 3 hours, and 21 minutes after the accident, Johann Westhauser finally came out of Riesending's entrance. Bavarian mountain rescue officials told the waiting reporters that the rescue was successful as medical teams got Johann ready for helicopter transport. At 12:17 p.m., a rescue helicopter flew him to Murnau Trauma Center. Johann spent 2 weeks in intensive care, including surgery to fix his broken cheekbone on June 26th. After leaving the hospital, he needed months of brain rehabilitation therapy, slowly getting back his thinking abilities and physical skills. This rescue shows what humans can achieve by working together, even when faced with seemingly impossible challenges, proving that even in the darkest places on Earth, hope and determination can find a way forward. From Germany's cold Riesending cave to the hot deserts of America, cave dangers exist worldwide. After Johann Westhauser's rescue in Bavaria, another group of explorers faced their own cave crisis. Deep under New Mexico's Carlsbad caverns, where ancient crystals hang like frozen waterfalls, experienced cave explorers found themselves fighting for survival as the beautiful cave showed its deadly side. Carlsbad Cavern Tragedy. In the scorching summer heat of 1980, Carlsbad Cavern stood like a silent guardian of the New Mexico desert. While thousands of tourists followed the safety of marked paths each day, 2 teenagers sought something more. On July 18, 1980, David Carson and John Brock, both 19 years old, came to Carlsbad Caverns National Park in New Mexico as the sun was going down. They weren't regular tourists. They were young people looking for excitement who thought nothing bad could happen to them, like many teenagers do. Earlier that afternoon, they had stopped at the Cactus Inn, a bar near the park, where they drank several beers. The alcohol made them feel braver for what they planned to do next. By 4:45 p.m., they got to the visitor center when most people were leaving. Park rangers were getting ready to close at 5:30 p.m. About 1,876 people had visited the cave that day, which was normal for summer Fridays. But Carson and Brock didn't want to stay on the safe, lit paths that 750,000 tourists walk on each year. They wanted to go past the railings, into the dark parts where park rangers don't go, and where nature is wild and dangerous. The alcohol they drank made them feel brave, and stopped them from thinking clearly. They snuck past other visitors, looking at the dark areas beyond the regular paths. They were drawn to the unexplored parts of Carlsbad like moths to a flame. They had no idea they were about to become part of the cave's dark history. Some boundaries exist for a reason. Pushing against the flow of departing visitors, Carson and Brock moved deeper into the cave system, their footsteps echoing in the increasingly empty passages. At 5:17 p.m., they arrived at the Eve Theater Chamber, a massive space where the regular tour path ended. Here stood a heavy chain with a clear warning sign. Do not go beyond chain. Danger. Restricted area. For the 1,874 other visitors that day, this barrier was the end of their journey. For park staff, it marked the division between safe cave and the wild sections requiring special permits and equipment. The deadliest decisions often feel like adventure in the moment. The alcohol in their bodies affected their thinking. Their blood alcohol level was about 0.12%, which is higher than the legal driving limit. They saw the chain not as a warning to stay away, but as an invitation to explore. Nobody will know, Brock whispered as they looked around to make sure no one could see them. They bent down and went under the chain, crossing from safety into dangerous areas where people had died before. The lights from the safe paths grew dimmer behind them as they walked into places very few visitors had ever gone. In the darkness, every sound becomes a warning, every shadow a potential threat. As they went deeper, Carson and Brock felt the cave's complete silence all around them. The temperature dropped to a cool 56 degrees Fahrenheit, 13 degrees Celsius, much colder than the hot 97 degrees Fahrenheit summer day above ground. The air felt wet and somehow threatening. Carson went first, using his small flashlight that only lit up about 15 feet ahead in the total darkness. The batteries were already half dead, and this weak light was their only way to see. In the deep darkness, both teenagers felt scared, like the weight of the mountain was pressing down on them. The only sounds were their footsteps on the rough ground and occasional water drops falling, the same drops that had slowly created these cave rooms over millions of years. They thought they were being careful, but the alcohol in their blood, 0.12%, had made their movements clumsy and their thinking fuzzy. What they believed was careful walking was actually dangerous, stumbling through one of America's most deadly wild cave systems. Little did they know, the cave was watching, waiting, as it had for countless millennia before human feet ever touched its floors. A few feet ahead, they spotted a metal gate with a lock on it. The gate was put there in 1975, after 2 people almost died in the cave. A big sign on the 6-foot gate read, "Authorized personnel only. Hazardous conditions beyond this point." This was the final barrier between the safe tourist area and the dangerous unmapped caves beyond. Most people would have gone back at this point. But at 5:42 p.m., Carson and Brock, still under the effects of alcohol and feeling excited, decided to keep going. Carson shined his flashlight on the walls, searching for an alternative route. They soon spotted a narrow ledge about 7 feet above the path, a dangerous bypass only 10 inches wide in some places. Carson went first, testing each step on the slippery surface wet with moisture and covered with bat droppings. The ledge contained uneven sections and loose rocks that shifted underfoot. He held his flashlight in one hand, while slowly advancing, gripping the rough cave wall with his other hand. Brock followed behind him, breathing heavily from the effort. Below them stretched complete darkness. They remained unaware they were traversing above a 70-foot drop called Bottomless Pit, just one of 89 deep vertical shafts in this section of Carlsbad caverns. One misstep in the darkness can change everything forever. Each step was risky, each safe foothold a small win. Still, they kept going, certain they would soon find cave areas few tourists had ever seen. The time was about 9:45 p.m., more than 4 hours after the park closed. By now, their flashlight batteries were weak, giving off dim light that barely cut through the thick darkness. As Carson moved along the narrow ledge 40 feet above the cave floor, his right foot hit a loose rock. The rock broke beneath him, sending small pieces falling into the darkness below. For 2 seconds, he tried to keep his balance, his arms waving wildly. Then he fell. The sound of his body hitting the rocks echoed through the cave, a terrible thud followed by the noise of moving stones. Carson had fallen onto a pile of sharp rocks at the bottom. Brock stood frozen on the ledge, his shaking flashlight pointed downward. In the weak light, he saw his friend's body sprawled on the sharp rocks below. The silent cave now filled with Carson's painful moans. Their adventure had instantly become a nightmare. Frightened but determined, Brock searched for a way down. Finding a less steep section, he half climbed, half slid down the wall, cutting his hands on the sharp rocks as he hurried to reach his injured friend. In the depths of Carlsbad, help was hours away, if it could come at all. When Brock reached Carson, his friend was barely awake, with a pain-filled face wet with tears. Large rocks had fallen on him during the fall, trapping him in a small space with sharp stones pressing against his body. Brock quickly removed the biggest rocks holding his friend down. The sight was sickening. Carson's body was badly injured, with cuts and bruises all over his arms, face, and chest. His shirt was ripped and soaked with blood from many deep cuts. Worst of all were Carson's legs. They lay bent at strange angles and didn't move at all. When Brock carefully tried to lift Carson's upper body, a horrible scream filled the cave. Carson's face turned white as paper, and his eyes looked distant and glassy with fear. He breathed in quick, painful gasps. Carson whispered that he couldn't feel his legs or anything below his waist, his voice shaking. The words seemed to float in the cold, damp cave air. Brock's heart sank. At that moment, 740 feet underground and over 2 miles from the cave entrance, He realized the terrible truth he couldn't speak aloud. His 19-year-old friend had probably broken his back, and they were trapped deep inside one of America's most difficult cave systems, with nobody knowing their location. As the reality of their situation settled in, both teenagers faced the most terrifying question: would either of them make it out alive? Panic filled Brock like ice water. They were trapped deep in the cave where no one could hear them scream. No visitors or rangers would find them. They were completely alone. Carson's condition got worse with each minute. His breathing became shallow and quick. His skin turned gray in the dim light. By 10:12 p.m., 5 hours after the park closed, Carson's body temperature was dropping in the cold 56-degree Fahrenheit cave air. Brock faced a terrible choice: leave to get help or stay with his friend. If he left, Carson might die alone, or Brock might never find his way back to this spot. If he stayed, both might die. He squeezed Carson's cold hand, trying to control his fear. With Carson paralyzed and trapped under rocks, Brock had to make the hardest decision of his life. Every minute lowered Carson's chances of survival, but one wrong move could kill them both. Sometimes survival comes down to one person making an impossible choice in the dark. Leaving Carson in the dark, Brock started the hard journey back through Carlsbad's confusing passages. His dim flashlight made shadows that confused him. He felt the weight of their terrible situation and the guilt of ignoring warning signs while drunk. At 10:38 p.m., panicking and confused, he took a wrong turn where 3 passages met, going deeper into unmapped parts instead of toward the exit. His breathing became fast and shallow as fear took over. After 20 minutes of scared searching, Brock faced a horrible truth. He was lost in Carlsbad's 30-mile maze. All passages looked the same in the weak light, with no signs to follow. His flashlight grew dimmer as the batteries died. He froze with doubt and fear. Every minute lost meant less chance for Carson to survive. Though the cave stayed at 56 degrees Fahrenheit, Brock's panic made him sweat heavily, dangerously cooling his body in the damp cave air. In the darkness underground, time stretches endlessly, while hope shrinks with every wrong turn. In a desperate moment of clarity, Brock slapped his own face hard. The pain cut through his panic. After 3 deep breaths, he forced himself to think step by step about their cave path. At 11:17 p.m., he spotted a mark on the wall, his own handprint in the dust from earlier. With new focus, Brock began retracing their route. He recognized details from hours before: a unique rock shape, an unusual stalactite, parts of the gate they went around. He moved faster as things looked familiar, though dangers remained in the dim light. After 3 hours and 42 minutes of hard work through the complex cave, Brock finally reached the main visitor center at 2:24 a.m. Dirty, bloody, and sweaty, he fell into the night security office where Ranger John McLaughlin worked. Brock reported his friend's fall and inability to move his legs while barely standing himself. McLaughlin immediately called for emergency help, activating the park's technical rescue team for cave emergencies. Within 17 minutes, team leader Mark Meyer gathered 5 rescue specialists with medical and climbing gear. Every minute mattered, with Carson trapped and injured for nearly 5 hours. The race to save a life deep underground had officially begun. Within 52 minutes, a special cave rescue team arrived at the visitor center. Led by rescue specialist Maria Gonzalez, the 7 rescuers carried 126 pounds of gear, including a special stretcher, neck brace, ropes, and medical supplies. At 3:17 a.m., with Brock guiding them and using bright helmet lights, they entered the cave. The team found Carson at 5:44 a.m., 8 hours after his fall. He was barely awake with a dangerous body temperature of 92 degrees Fahrenheit, suffering from both injuries and cold exposure. Paramedic Kevin DeSoto gave him pain medicine and fluids through an IV while others checked his injuries. Carson had a visibly damaged spine at the T12 vertebra, broken bones sticking through the skin of both legs, and had lost much blood. Working with careful skill, the team stabilized Carson's spine with a vacuum splint and secured him to the special cave stretcher. They tightened each strap carefully to prevent any movement that could harm his spine further. The rescue required moving through 2.3 miles of rough cave paths, including 3 steep sections needing rope systems. The removal began at 6:32 a.m. In the tightest passages, rescuers had to turn the stretcher sideways and pass it hand to hand. At one point, called Junction 7, they found a narrow 22-inch gap that forced them to partly take apart the stretcher while keeping Carson's spine perfectly still. The team moved at just 0.2 miles per hour, planning each step to reduce pain and prevent more injury. Every minute underground feels like an eternity when life hangs in the balance. The rescue work lasted through the night and into morning. For 7 hours and 23 minutes, the team moved along the dangerous path to the surface, going very slowly to keep Carson safe. At hard spots, they made human chains, passing medical tools ahead while always checking Carson's heart rate and breathing, which were getting better with medical help. When sunlight first appeared over the New Mexico desert at 6:55 a.m. on July 19, 1980, the rescue team finally came out of Carlsbad Cavern's main entrance. 6 tired rescuers carried the stretcher with Carson strapped to it, after moving him through 2.3 miles of cave passages and up 750 feet in height. A medical helicopter from Guadalupe Medical Center waited nearby, its blades already turning. Within 17 minutes, Carson was flying to the hospital. There, Dr. Raymond Vickers gave the terrible news. Carson's spinal cord was completely cut at the T10 vertebra. He would never walk again. He also had severe low body temperature, multiple broken bones in both legs, and serious internal bleeding that needed 3 different surgeries. The accident shocked the National Park Service. Park Superintendent Richard Smith held an emergency news meeting, saying this was the 4th serious accident in Carlsbad's restricted areas since 1975. Within 30 days, the park put in new steel barriers with alarm systems at main entry points, started 24-hour security patrols, and raised the fine for entering restricted areas to $10,000. One night of reckless adventure resulted in a lifetime of consequences, both for the young men who ignored the warnings and for the park tasked with protecting visitors from themselves. From the dry caves of New Mexico to the underwater caves of New Zealand, the dangers beneath the Earth's surface take many forms. While David Carson survived his terrible accident in Carlsbad Caverns in 1980, he would never walk again. 30 years later, in 2011, Agnes Maloka, one of the world's best cave divers, entered the waters of Resurgence Cave, Pierce Resurgence Cave tragedy. In the deadly silence of underwater caves, the line between discovery and death is measured in breaths. On March 13, 2010, that line was crossed. On March 13, 2010, a team of experienced cave divers arrived at the remote location in the Mount Arthur Range. The team included Agnes Maloka, 29, Richard Harris, 45, and Craig Challen, 53, all world-class divers with years of experience. What makes someone willing to enter a place where a single mistake means certain death? They weren't casual explorers, they were specialists pushing human limits. That morning, they prepared their equipment: gas tanks, regulators, heated undergarments, and powerful lights for the pitch-black depths. By 8:45 a.m., the team gathered at the crystal-clear pool where Pierce Resurgence bubbles up. Around them, 12 support divers checked equipment and reviewed emergency plans. The air temperature was just 11 degrees Celsius. They knew that 87% of all diving deaths in caves happened to poorly equipped divers, but they had the right training. Previous expeditions had reached depths of 177 meters, making Pierce one of New Zealand's deepest known underwater caves. Have you ever wondered what drives people to explore places where no human was meant to go? What invisible line separates adventure from recklessness? As the divers did their final checks, none knew they would soon become part of Pierce Resurgence's dark history, a place where the clear water hides deadly dangers below. The dive team entered the water at 9:23 a.m., disappearing beneath the turquoise surface. Could any amount of training truly prepare them for what awaited in the depths? Agnes led the way, followed by Harris and Challen, each carrying multiple tanks. The cold water bit through their thick 7mm suits, while the current pushed against them. The entrance, a a narrow opening just 1.2 meters wide, forced each diver to squeeze through with their bulky equipment. As they went past 40 meters deep, the cave opened up. The main passage widened into a massive tunnel sloping downward. Their powerful 21-watt lights cut through water so clear they could see 30 meters ahead, showing the white limestone walls. At this depth, nitrogen affects the mind, a mild intoxication divers call the martini effect. One reason they breathed special gas mixtures: 18% oxygen, 30% helium, 52% nitrogen, instead of regular air. Have you ever felt your mind slowly changing without being able to stop it? The team used hand signals to communicate, with Agnes marking their path with arrows pointing to the exit. By 10:15 a.m., the team had reached 110 meters depth, deeper than the Statue of Liberty is tall. The pressure at this depth, 12 times that at the surface, squeezed their bodies and equipment, making every movement harder. Their dive computers showed they would need to stop at specific depths during their ascent to avoid getting sick or dying from coming up too quickly. What happens when your body becomes a ticking time bomb? Still, they continued deeper, trying to beat the previous depth record of 177 meters. At 120 meters, Agnes decided to explore a narrow side passage they hadn't mapped before. The tunnel, barely 0.9 meters across, went away from their main route. After a brief discussion with hand signals, they split up. Agnes would explore the side passage for 10 minutes, while Harris and Challen continued on the main route. How many seconds does it take for a carefully planned dive to turn deadly? They synchronized their dive computers, agreed to meet at 10:45 a.m., and separated. The time was 10:32 a.m., and the deadly clock had started ticking. The first sign of trouble came at 10:47 a.m. Harris and Challen had reached 194 meters, a new record for Pierce Resurgence, but Agnes hadn't arrived at the meeting point. How long would you wait for someone in a place where every minute uses up your air? They waited for 5 minutes, shining their lights down the side passage with no response. At such depths, each diver had a maximum bottom time of 25 minutes before running low on gas. Harris checked his computer. They had been at depth for 22 minutes. The math was simple and scary. They couldn't wait any longer without risking their own lives. With growing worry, Harris made the hard decision all cave divers fear. They would have to start going up without Agnes. Could you leave a friend behind to save yourself? At 10:53 a.m., Harris wrote a message on his underwater slate. Agnes, we ascended at 10:53, low gas, meet at 60 meters stop. Their computers showed they needed to make 8 stops during their ascent, spending 167 minutes, nearly 3 hours, slowly returning to the surface. Going up too fast would likely cause deadly bubbles to form in their blood. At 11:26 a.m., as Harris and Challen were at their first stop at 90 meters, they saw a light below them. What happens when hope arrives too late? It was Agnes, swimming up too quickly, moving strangely. Even from a distance, they could see she was in serious trouble. Her main light was missing, and she was using only her backup light. Most alarming was how fast she was ascending, 15 meters per minute, 3 times faster than the safe rate of 5 meters per minute. Harris immediately recognized she was confused from gas problems. When Agnes reached them, her eyes were wide and she was breathing fast, using up her remaining air quickly. When Harris tried to signal her to slow down, she seemed confused. Is there anything more frightening than watching someone you care about slip away while you're powerless to help? At 11:28 a.m., just 2 minutes after rejoining them, Agnes suddenly went limp. Her mouthpiece fell out, bubbles escaping in a final breath. Despite their quick response, it was too late. Her dive computer later showed she had run out of gas during her exploration and had made a desperate rush to reach her teammates, coming up far too quickly. Harris and Challen faced an impossible situation at 90 meters depth. They now had an unconscious diver and over 2 hours of mandatory stops ahead. What would you do when every possible choice leads to tragedy? Working quickly, they secured Agnes to Harris using a clip, keeping her mouthpiece in place. Challen adjusted her vest slightly to achieve neutral buoyancy. The painful reality was clear. Agnes had likely suffered fatal gas bubbles in her bloodstream from her rapid ascent. With no heartbeat and fixed, dilated pupils, Harris, who was also a doctor, knew she was gone, but they would not leave her body. At 11:42 a.m., the surface team began to worry. The dive plan said the team should start ascending no later than 11 a.m., and the first support diver, Michael Johnson, 38, went down to the 30-meter stop to check. Can you imagine the dread of diving into darkness, not knowing if your friends are alive or dead? Johnson carried extra gas tanks and hot water bottles for the long, cold stops. When he reached the 30-meter point at 11:57 a.m., no one was there. He waited for 15 minutes before returning to tell the surface team. The surface team activated their emergency plan at 12:20 p.m. Two more support divers, Sarah Thompson, 41, and David Wilson, 39, descended with emergency gear including an underwater shelter where divers can partially remove equipment during long stops. How many minutes does it take for hope to turn to dread? They finally found Harris and Challen at the 21-meter stop at 12:47 p.m. The grim sight told the story. Agnes was clearly dead, but her teammates were still methodically completing their stops while keeping her body between them. The water was now 5 degrees Celsius, and both surviving divers showed signs of being too cold, with shivering and bluish lips. The rescue became a careful dance of managing air supplies, body temperatures, and decompression stops. What price do rescuers pay when saving others? Support divers rotated every 30 minutes, bringing fresh tanks and hot water bottles that the survivors tucked inside their suits to fight the cold. Dr. Elizabeth Baker, 44, the expedition's doctor on the surface, prepared oxygen equipment and contacted the nearest special pressure chamber at Nelson Hospital, 76 kilometers away. At 2:36 p.m., after their final stop at 3 meters for 52 minutes, Harris and Challen finally surfaced with Agnes's body. They had spent 5 hours and 13 minutes in water cold enough to kill an unprotected person in less than 1 hour. Both men were exhausted and emotionally devastated, with body temperatures of 35.1 degrees Celsius and 34.8 degrees Celsius, dangerously close to hypothermia. News of the accident spread quickly through Nelson, New Zealand. By 4:15 p.m., a medical helicopter brought emergency doctor Dr. Robert Taylor, 52, to check the survivors. How do you measure the true cost of exploration? The local police arrived at 4:35 p.m. to investigate, led by Senior Constable Mark Williams, 47. Agnes's body was respectfully placed in a transport bag, while Harris and Challen, wrapped in thermal blankets and breathing oxygen, told the authorities what happened. The initial police report noted that no safety rules had been broken. This was simply the risk of pushing the limits of extreme cave diving. The investigation revealed the full story 3 days later. Agnes had ventured 78 meters into the unexplored side passage, reaching 182 meters depth, where she discovered a large chamber later named Agnes Chamber in her honor. Her dive computer showed she had stayed 7 minutes longer than planned due to the excitement of the discovery. At this extreme depth, those extra minutes required much more gas than expected. When she turned to exit, she had only 41 bar of pressure left in her main tank, less than 15% of her starting supply, and below the safe minimum of 50 bar. Could a moment of wonder be worth the ultimate price? Her backup light showed it was activated at 10:39 a.m., likely after bumping her main light against the narrow cave wall, slowing her progress and increasing her gas use. The cave diving community worldwide mourned the loss of a rising star. At just 29 years old, Agnes had already set numerous records and explored underwater caves on 3 continents. What legacy do we leave when we chase our passions to the very edge? On March 28, 2010, 15 days after the accident, the New Zealand Cave Diving Association held a memorial service at Pierce Resurgence, attended by 74 divers from 9 countries. They placed a bronze plaque reading, "Agnes Maloka, explorer, friend, legend. The darkness claimed her light but not her spirit," at the cave entrance. Harris and Challen, still recovering from the trauma, spoke about Agnes's passion and how her final discovery had greatly expanded the known size of the Pierce system. The accident led to important changes in extreme cave diving rules worldwide. 6 months later, in September 2010, the International Association of Nitrox and Technical Divers published new guidelines for dives below 150 meters, including requirements for extra gas supplies and updated calculations that added 33% more reserve than previous standards. Is any discovery worth dying for? Or is the pursuit itself what gives meaning to life? In the years that followed, Harris and Challen continued cave diving, carrying Agnes's memory with them. In 2018, they became international heroes for their role in the Thai cave rescue of the trapped soccer team, a rescue many believe they approached with extra caution because of the lessons learned at Pierce Resurgence on that fateful day in March 2010. One diver's tragedy became the reason for safer exploration and ultimately helped save 13 lives that might otherwise have been lost.